Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Impaction. Welcome to our 22nd video session. Today, we are going to be interviewing Sheri Kurdakul from VictimsVoice. And before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Impaction and ultimately the purpose of the video session itself. Here in Impaction, we're working to empower social innovators and entrepreneurs to not only work together, but to work in the space in order to making a difference more accessible to people all over the world. The purpose of our video session is essentially to check in with each other every other week and ultimately learn about the newest ideas and the entrepreneurs who are working in the space to make a positive difference. Today, we are going to be interviewing and speaking to Sheri Kurdakul, the founder of VictimsVoice. VictimsVoice is an app that is working to fix the documentation burdens victims face when reporting abuse, making it more possible for them to bring their abusers to justice. Before we start with the video session, we would love for everyone to introduce themselves in 2 sentences or less, and then we can ask Sheri to interview herself, and then we can go and move forward in this call. So ultimately, I'll start with myself. I'm Shivani, one of the co-founders of Impaction, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. Meghna, can you go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Meghna. I am a UI UX designer for Impaction, and I'm based in Des Moines, Iowa. Tanvi?
Hi everybody. I am Tanvi. I am the product manager with Impaction, and I'm based in Boston. Leo?
Hi, my name is Leo. I'm a UI UX designer for Impaction, and I live in Boston. Sergina?
Hi, my name is Sergina. I'm a UI UX designer, and I'm based in New York City.
Thank you. And then Sukanya, you want to go next?
Yes. Hi everyone, I'm Sukanya. I'm one of the co-founders of Impaction. I'm based in Texas and I work as a HR generalist. Nabil, you want to go next?
Hey, I'm Nabil. I am the founder of Manafta and I'm based in Calgary, Canada.
Merhaba.
Do I have to choose someone?
No. I'll do the roll call. Beatrice, you want to go next?
Yes, I am Beatrice. I'm the CEO of Prevalent, and I'm here from Sierra Leone.
Thank you. And then Komeng, do you want to go next?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Komang. I come from Bali, Indonesia. I'm a founder of Chelota Bali. I just graduated from my university. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And yeah, Sheri, if you want to say a few words about yourself, that'd be very much appreciated.
My name is Sheri Kurdakul, which I see a Turkish flag in the background of someone's video. Merhaba. I'm married to a Turk. I live and work in primarily Princeton, New Jersey. Today I'm in my co-working space, 1776 in Cherry Hill, which is just outside of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, and I am very happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sheri. So I guess we'll just start with the first question. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you embarked in this social entrepreneurship journey, and what is the specific problem that you're trying to solve through VictimsVoice?
Sure. So in 2016, my youngest daughter, who's now 13, when she was 10, she built an anti-bullying mobile app for her science fair project. It was called the Zebra app. It stood for Zoe Ending Barriers in Reporting Adversity. Our corporate name is Abinra. I was told by my daughter that I was allowed to use any parts of her project except her name. So we dropped the Z off, and that's where Abinra came from. We do business as VictimsVoice. So when she built her app, the idea that you could solve problems with technology really came to the forefront. Someone's got a lot of background noise.
Yeah, can everyone please mute themselves so we don't hear the background?
So I am a survivor of 29 years of domestic violence. I have overcome a divorce, a nasty custody battle, and just from my own experiences knew how difficult starting, from age 2 until well into my 20s, of what that, what those problems are that victims face when trying to come forward. When I started digging into the numbers and started realizing that if you broke down victimology as a whole into like 100 people, 77 of those people would never even report that something happened to them. Reason being that they feel like they're not going to be believed, they're not going to be heard out of fear, multiple reasons. For the 23 people that do report, 80% of those cases get dismissed because they can't remember the details. They don't have enough details to bring it forward to go from being reported to becoming a case of law. So that's really where I saw a huge problem. If we could tackle that problem alone, those 77 people that did not report might consider reporting if they could document what was going on to them and know that they would be believed. So that's the problem that we decided to solve.
Great. So ultimately, when it comes to like the 77 people who don't even report this in the first place, where is this problem the most prevalent in the world, and why is this the case?
So I'm a graphically inclined person, if you haven't noticed. So I did a little map for you guys, and this is according to the World Health Organization. These are the percentages of cases that are reported. Now, in the Americas, we see that it's 36% with 33% of high income. We know from a study that was done in February of 2018 that the actual numbers look like 81% of females and 43% of males will be sexually harassed or abused in their lifetime. That's a far cry from 36%. While this is a global issue, we right now are only focused in the US. We have to get this right based on where we are, with the culture that we are embedded in, with the laws that we know. And once we get that right, then our eventual plan is to start hitting some global markets. Yeah.
And you think that one of the challenges behind this is because of the documentation that comes with like more of the legal matters, maybe education or training around facing or like showcasing sexual abuse and making it less of a stigma might also be like a bottoms-up approach of showing this.
Correct. We're getting ready to release a blog post in the next week or so, actually a series of blogs just on getting a protective order. So to exemplify how important documentation is in the process, when someone is going through abuse and they decide that they need to get a protective order against their abuser, here in the States, there is a form that you fill out, and it's usually based on a particular incident. There's a small box that says, is there any historical information that you'd like to include? It's not a big box, and oftentimes if you go to a police department, the police don't even point that box out. But in that box, if you are not explicit in giving dates and what happened, so Christmas 2017, thrown down the staircase from my, intimate partner. On February 2nd was punched in the face. Those details, if they're not put in that box, when you go to your hearing, you are not allowed to talk about those. at all. You cannot bring them to the hearing, even though it shows a pattern of abuse. So education is really key for us. And the documentation piece is what's needed. Can you imagine being a victim, going to your protective hearing, only being able to talk about one incident, which may not have been the worst incident, and then being denied or only being ordered a temporary protective order? Meanwhile, you fear for your life and maybe your children and your pets, but you couldn't bring up all that historical because you didn't fill out a box. Because maybe you couldn't remember the specifics, you didn't have the exact dates, you don't remember. And that's just a protective order. That's not an actual going to the police to turn somebody in. Yeah.
Wow, that's shocking, and that's shocking that that hasn't been more heavily scrutinized, especially in the U.S. That's insane. So can you tell us a little bit, like, when you are a victim of sexual harassment or abuse and you go onto your app, like, how does your app make that more, like, streamline the process a little more?
Right. So I'll just talk about the app for a moment. When there are several protections in place, first of all, every decision that we make is very intentional and made to protect the victim, bottom line, over profits every time. So our app is available, and for perfect example, our app is available in the Google Store for Android users. For iPhone users, they have to use a progressive web app. And the reason is that Apple wanted us to give up too much privacy and too much security. And when we refused, they refused us access to the App Store. So we, rather than relinquishing any power, privacy, or security, we decided to forego the App Store altogether. So that's one thing. When we license direct to the victim. Victims feel very powerless already. And so by licensing direct to the victim, we give them total control over their account. Now, it costs money to have a team and to build technology and the design and everything else. So we do license it for a fee, and it's $39.95 US per year. We only make them pay the annual license when they need to utilize the app. So if they use the app for 2 years and then drop off for 10 years, when they come back, they can just renew their license for that next year, and then all their information will be there for them. When they get an activation code, they set up their profile. All their information is encrypted and stored. So even when they set up their account, they have to give their name, their address, their phone number, their email address. We don't see any of that information. In order to meet federal and state regulations and compliance, all that information is encrypted immediately. We don't even have access to it. They become an ID number to us. Once they get inside the app, they have a few choices. They can start documenting, or they can go to the menu and they can set up what's called a journal designee. Now, the reality of life is that a large percentage of victims do become deceased at the hands of their abusers. So a journal designee is set up. It's what's known as a durable power of attorney. It's a one-time use. So in the event that the user becomes deceased or medically incapacitated, this journal designee could then petition us with legal documentation to gain access to the account, in the effect of they can then select a records recipient that would receive the records. No one at any time has access to the records that have been submitted, including the user. And I'll talk about that in just a second. The records recipient is a legal entity that might receive the report. When a records recipient is designated, those records get compiled into a legally admissible PDF report that gets sent to that records recipient. Actually, it doesn't even get sent directly to them. The records recipient gets a notification and a one-time access where they log into their VictimsVoice Lite account, which shows them with whom they have access to those records. They click a button, it downloads those records to the records recipient's device, and then the access is cut off. If they need access again, the user has to explicitly grant them access to those records. So the user determines if, when, and to whom those records get submitted. Gives, like I said, complete control of the account to the user. Now, the user's third choice is to start documenting. And when they open the screen, it asks them simply, tell me what happened. Tell us your story in your own words. It's an open-ended text field. And we have to just give them that opportunity to tell us in their own words what happened. Every screen has a quit button on it, and the quit button, because when you're using the app, location services are turned on automatically for the use of the app only. So while they're using the app, every time that they go to another screen or they hit the quit button, it encrypts that data for that screen and sends it to our servers. So even if they only get one screen in, we've collected that information and established that something's happened. When they hit the quit button, because the location services are turned on, it brings up the weather channel in their area so that it just looks like they were looking up the weather from wherever they are. The next screen that the victim would go into simply says, are you safe to proceed? Yes or no. We want to determine, are you in a safe space? Are you able to continue? Because it's really important to us that we don't further put the victim into any kind of dangerous situation. Then the next screen, if they say yes, simply kind of sets the expectation. This is going to take several minutes to complete. You can quit at any time. Your information will be saved, but we need to make sure that you're safe. If they hit yes, then it goes into a series of questions that guides them through the process of making sure that we're collecting all the information that needs to be collected. Now, I say guiding questions, these are not leading questions, and there's a difference in legal terms. We don't want to lead any information into having the victim say something that they wouldn't normally think of saying themselves. These are simply, what type of situation was this? Was this verbal? Was this physical? Was it online and virtual? Was it sexual? Where did it happen? Did it happen at work, at home, in a leisure activity? And all of those types of questions are multi-select. So they're encouraged to choose as many as possible. From a technical perspective, when a question is selected, if it's deselected, we also capture that information. So you can see that they selected a button and then deselected a button. We go through a series of questions, making sure that we cover their environment, where there are multiple victims involved, multiple abusers involved. Has this ever happened before? So all these things so that the information can be corroborated by investigators and attorneys later on when it needs to be. And we also offer the ability to upload or take pictures, and those are also attached to the record. And our system grabs all the metadata from the pictures so we can tell which device it came from, when it came from, and where it came from. Yeah.
So it seems like heavy data collection is very much necessary for an app of this caliber. I think that, so we have like a couple of community questions already, actually, and Beatrice actually asked one about her country, Sierra Leone. Beatrice, do you want to ask the question? I think she's still typing in the messenger, but.
Okay.
And Beatrice, you are on mute, so you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I was asking, how can this app be of help to Africa, and then I was actually thinking, especially in Sierra Leone, we are having lots and lots of abuses, working in the community with vulnerable girls and women. This has been like a day-to-day thing that is happening in Sierra Leone. There's been a lot and lots of abuse. So I was asking, how can this app help victims without voices here in Sierra Leone? And another question I was just about to ask again, sexual harassment is in the increase in secondary schools among girls and their teachers. It's like a set for grade. They can't say it out because getting fear that now if I say it's going to be the end of my school. So it's also a challenge for us here in Sierra Leone. So how can this app be of help, one, to the voiceless there in the remote communities, the villages, and also for our school-going children?
Those are two really great questions. I'm going to tackle the second question first, and then I'll get back to the first question. So although our focus is domestic violence right now, our technology is actually built, and the questions in the app are built to handle any kind of discrimination, harassment, or abuse. So this app can be used, and we encourage here in the US, because of child data protection acts, our app has to legally be for people of the ages of 13 and older. It's in our terms and conditions. Now, if someone who's under 13 uses our app, you know, we only know what age they claim to be, so, you know, I'll leave it there. So yes, our app can be used for school-age children in school situations as well. For Sierra Leone, we are only available in the US right now, and that's really from a business perspective, only because we just launched publicly June 14th. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary, June 26th. We are a bootstrapped company, meaning that I am footing the bill for all of this. And so, you know, we are having to get traction and generate revenue in order to move to those next levels. Now, with that said, 2022, we are going to start moving into other markets. If things start to progress a lot faster and we're able to move into other markets faster, that's great. I will start fundraising when we make the business decision to go into other countries, because when we do, we want those countries to run pretty autonomously, pretty much on their own. We will create global offices. The reason being that there are so many cultural differences, so many legal differences, and we will have to build out teams in those countries with people native to those countries. And we have to start building those relationships in order to do so. I can't presume to go into Sierra Leone and know what all the legal complexities are, what the cultural differences are. I know with my team here in the US what we can handle in the US. But it's a whole new, it's almost like a whole new company to move into another country. And so we have to be very respectful of people in those countries and make sure that we're working with teams that are native to those countries. So it's not available in Sierra Leone yet, but you know, in the future it will be.
Great, thank you so much, Sheri. We actually have another question from Sukanya about sexual harassment at the workplace. Sukanya, you want to ask?
Yes. So Sheri, I am a basic HR student. I've read a lot of articles about sexual harassment in workplace and how it goes unnoticed, especially for women, because they fear they would lose their jobs. And it's becoming a bigger issue day by day. How do you think you can educate or make more people to use your app to create an awareness or eradicate sexual harassment at workplace?
Great question. A lot of our marketing efforts, actually most of our marketing efforts, are done through social. I've built this company networking, big time networking. And I've met people where they are through social. So a lot of the domestic violence we talk about through Facebook and Twitter, a lot of what's going on in different areas through Twitter. But in the workplace, LinkedIn has been a fabulous outlet for us. So I might do articles around such as a protection order on our blog and push that out through Facebook. But there's a whole new element to protection orders that relates to business. What if you have an employee that you're a business owner and you have employees? What states have laws on the books right now where time off for sexual violence, sexual harassment are worked into those paid time off? And there are many states that have that. If you feel that you are going through the proper channels at work, what are your other options if you're not getting what you need at work? Or if you don't trust your HR department? There was a huge article, radio show done on NPR about a security company, the primary security company that secures our airports, and how invasive their sexual harassment is, and how one woman's journey to try to change that, and ultimately she did lose her job. So having that documentation in place to say, if you do lose your job, you now have all this documentation that you control. HR doesn't control it, you control. And if you do lose your job, now you have a civil case, because not only can you sue the company for sexual harassment, but you can sue them for wrongful dismissal. And ultimately you can get the satisfaction that you need from that. And depending on how severe it is, you can not only get a new job and not have to work in an environment like that. You can become a voice for someone else if that's the path that you choose to take. But now you also end up with a cash payout for the for the troubles that you went through and the harassment that you went through. So by documenting and owning that documentation, you now have the power to say to HR, you need to fix this. And if you don't, and I'm dismissed because of this, I take my evidence with me. That's not a threat. That's just saying this has to be taken care of. And it's not acceptable. I think it's also up to us to say this is not acceptable. I think oftentimes there are many situations where you would lose your job. There are situations where that's the perception, but oftentimes we catch people off guard when we stand our ground and they are fearful of those lawsuits. And then change comes from those standing up.
So when you see EEOC lawsuits, mostly it's related to sexual harassment. Have you any time tried partnering or speaking with EEOC about your app or anything so that people know there's an app like this where they can document all their abuses at workplace that they're going through? Have you tried that kind of a thing?
Because we can't focus on everything out of the gate, what they say, spaghetti method, don't throw it against the wall and see what sticks. We are very focused, and out of the gate, we are very focused on domestic violence. There are other companies out there that are focused on sexual harassment in the workplace, and we will eventually get there. Building relationships takes time. Building relationships in such a sensitive space takes longer. Building that trust and credibility is just really hard in a space that is so personal. And domestic violence is something that's very underserved because it's very private. Our audience doesn't stand up and say, oh, I need your product. they do a very good job of hiding what's happening to them. And so it's a lot of outbound marketing, outbound communication, outbound touch points to try to resonate with our audience to get them to understand that they do have other options. Yeah. So we'll get there. You're going to hear a lot of that. So what other questions?
So we're talking, I think we already started talking about this particular topic, but more about like the challenges that you face in this space. And I think Komang had a particular question that he wanted to ask you. So Komang, I'll have you take it from here. If you can unmute yourself and ask Sheri your question.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry. Yes. Wait. Hello. Yes. My question is, what is your big challenges when your first time building this application from the beginning until at the present, and how do you manage your team internally and make collaboration with others and seeking for information and everything related? And is there any chance to make collaboration, especially me in Bali, Indonesia, to have the application or something like that we can collaborate with?
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So in the beginning, I was fortunate to kind of have my daughter's app to start with, which was just kind of a questionnaire, which is very similar if you think about it. If you kind of peel away the layers and get down to the basics, they're both questionnaires, right? The challenge became that there's so much regulation when you're talking about domestic violence, when you're talking about people's personal information. So when I first started off, I don't code. I'm the business CEO. I'm not the, tech CEO. So when I first started off, I can't build something. But actually what I did was I did build something. So I used Photoshop, built some screens with some questions, and used a technology called Marvel App. It's a prototyping tool. It was the cheapest one I could find that would do what I wanted it to do. Because money is tight, So I built a prototyping tool, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs are like, oh, you have to have people sign NDAs. You can't talk about what you're doing because somebody's going to steal your idea. I was almost hoping someone would steal my idea, because going into business, you have to be a lunatic to be an entrepreneur. And clearly I'm a lunatic. So I built this and just started literally knocking on doors. I would go to nonprofits, crisis centers that were working directly with victims. And I'd say, who in your organization is at the top? Who can I talk to? And then I would say, can you look at this and tell me what's wrong with it? And they would give me their feedback. And then I would call I'm not an attorney, but we're, highly a legal tool. So I called all my legal friends and said, look at this, tell me, what am I missing? What am I doing wrong? And I remember one of my friends very early on, we were at lunch, and she said to me, well, does your app meet the Daubert standard? And I said, what's the Daubert standard? That sounds fun. And she's like, no, it's not, but you should be meeting the Daubert standard. So she rattled down what the Daubert standard was. And I was like, okay, half listening and half my brain's churning. And so I went home and spent like 2 hours down the rabbit hole investigating what's the Daubert standard, what do we have to do to make sure that we're meeting that. I knew that HIPAA was going to come into play because we're asking personal identifiable information and we're storing that information. So then it was looking at what's involved in getting HIPAA compliant and certified. Then after we started building our real prototype, where I brought on my CTO and we started going into development, I started going around to potential clients and saying to them, what do you think? Would you use this? Would you buy our activation cards? And I'll talk about the activation cards in a second. But then they said, well, are you VAWA compliant? I was like, I'm feeling really good about this app. What's VAWA compliance? And then I'm like, oh my God, there's another one, And so then I found out about a conference where only 150 attorneys were invited to attend, and it's all around sexual violence. And so I jumped on LinkedIn and found the nonprofit that hosts this conference every year. And I started connecting with people inside the organization and making nice with them. And when it came time for their conference to open up to where you could start to apply, I applied. And then I started messaging all of them. I've applied. I'm not an attorney, but I really want to be there. And I got a ticket. I was really excited. It cost me a whole lot of money to be in New Orleans for a week. But I learned so much about what I didn't already know about the complexities of VAWA compliance. I learned that what we had built, we're already meeting VAWA regulation. So there was that verification. I met a whole host of people that I needed to be connected with, that were validating what we were doing, that were validating that they would use this. So just networking and validating, rebuilding, readjusting constantly. My prototype, my Marvel app prototype, I worked on for 2 years. The last 3 or 4 months, I started doing entrepreneurial boot camps to try to decide if this was going to be a viable revenue generating business. And then the last month before I made the decision was more of sitting down with my family and saying, if I do this, this is going to mean that for the next 5+ years, I'm basically going to be broke, non-existent, overworked, stressed out. Are you guys willing to put up with me in that capacity? And if it wasn't a unanimous decision, then I wasn't going to go forward. It's hard enough to be an entrepreneur. It's even harder in being a social enterprise entrepreneur. It's even harder being a female founder in a social impact for-profit company. And I just had to have full commitment. And I did. I got it. So that's when we decided to go for it. So
that's really inspirational. Thank you, Sheri. We have 2 questions left, and Meghna, I'll let you take it.
Well, it sounds like Nabil had a question about LinkedIn. Nabil, go ahead whenever we can.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, you said that LinkedIn was your biggest platform. I'm barely use LinkedIn. I don't really like it. So I mean, our biggest ones are social, like it would be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Why LinkedIn? It's interesting that you say that. And how'd you do it? Big question, but
okay. So full disclosure here, I am not a college graduate. I am 53 years old, so I'm that over 50 female with no college degree. All right. So there was a time, especially around 2008, when our own economy collapsed, that unless you had a college degree on your resume, you weren't going to get a job, period. Nobody would, your resume was guaranteed to go into the circular file, straight into the trash. So I also knew the power of networking and how building a network, a lot of employment is who you know. You find out about jobs before anybody else. You get the first interviews before anybody else, sheerly by networking.
Right.
And the business platform is LinkedIn. So I have always used LinkedIn from a business perspective. I don't look at LinkedIn to necessarily build my B2C, although for workplace harassment, it will become more prevalent in that. But I really work it from my entrepreneurial perspective. So fast forward, I don't need the college degree. Clearly, I'm here. I made it. Yay! But I use it to network with my strategic partners. We are 8 of us on the team now, 9 of us on the advisory team, all of which I've met. No, all but one with whom I've met through LinkedIn.
Interesting.
The one that I did not meet through LinkedIn, he's my marketing director. Back in the day when I was slinging coffee as a Starbucks store manager, he was one of my regular customers. And that's how we met. But just last week, I started targeting 5 key people that were on my list to get meetings with. That was my goal last week. This morning in my inbox was the 5th one getting back to me and setting a calendar date.
Nice.
So going out, being very specific about the ask. I've also been involved in BNI, Business Networking International.
Okay.
Really taught me, it's a professional group dedicated to referral networking. So they really teach you how to network.
Okay.
When I network, I don't connect with people to get something. I connect with people to build something or provide something. And that's really important.
Yeah.
When I applied for the Impaction, I applied knowing that I didn't meet all the requirements. But after I got my rejection for not, being entered into the contest formally, I reached out through LinkedIn, right? And said, hey, I think what you're doing is really powerful. I think what we're doing is really powerful. And although I don't fit into the box, I fit into the room. And what can I do to help promote what you guys are doing as well through what we're doing? So LinkedIn, it's a great outlet to put content, to hear what other people are doing, to comment, to build your network.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you change your content to make it more, I don't know, social media for me, it should be streamlined, right? It's like kind of like telling a story. So I feel like if LinkedIn is more of a business outlet, do you change your content in regards to that?
I post. So I have a company page,
Right.
which will post press releases when we're mentioned in the news. I believe I even posted about being on here today with you guys and gals. I use that to, when we had our launch party, we had a live launch party where we capped it at 50, but we did a Facebook Live and we promoted it through LinkedIn. I have a showcase page where we showcase the product. I haven't done enough work on that because I've been a little busy. But on my own personal page, then I go out and build my network. And I use other people that are in my space, so that are doing work in domestic violence. I'll connect with them privately through Messenger. I do most of my work through Messenger on LinkedIn, through LinkedIn Messenger. But I will comment to people that I feel are doing good work out there and really, chugging along. I'll go out there and be really supportive to them. And when I do blog posts, I will say, hey, I'm doing this blog post and here's why I feel it's relevant to the LinkedIn community. And then point back to, my post.
Interesting. Cool. That was very informative. I'm going to scope you out and creep you on LinkedIn pretty soon here.
Awesome. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I probably spend more time on social than my social media manager, just because people reaching out to me.
Yeah, that sounds about right. We have, so I know we said we had 2 last questions before, but we actually have 2 more.
Okay.
And we do have about 5 minutes left, so trying to squeeze this in is going to be really important. But yeah, go ahead, take it away, Leo.
So I wanted to know more about how everyone in just the social environment or anyone in any community could help out victims of who have faced any kind of abuse. You know, what are some of the solutions that everybody could implement? And the other question would be, what is a piece of advice that you would like to give to our community, the Impaction community, and social innovators and entrepreneurs?
Okay, so I'm going to step out of screen view for just a second here to answer one of your questions. I'm so glad you brought this up. So it's really hard, almost impossible, to have the conversation with a friend who you know is going through some kind of, they're in a relationship, they've got a boyfriend or a girlfriend that they're, really hot and heavy about, but this person is really treating them like crap. Your friend is going to get defensive if you try to talk to them about that, even though you know that they're starting to pull away from their friends and their family. They're starting to isolate themselves, all the signs that start to come about with someone who's going through that situation. So a quick fact, 99% of all domestic violence victims are also victims of financial abuse, meaning that they either don't have funds available to them or all of their funds are being watched and controlled. So I mentioned earlier our activation cards. We created a partner program, and the partner program is we sell activation cards. These are gift cards with activation codes on the back, and we sell these to organizations. We're partnering with police departments and nonprofits and community groups, whoever, attorneys, whoever has direct access to a victim and can get these cards. They purchase the cards and they give these cards to the victim. It eliminates the financial trail altogether. We at no point in time then know who they are because they're not putting their credit card information on our website for us to know who the transaction came through. You as an individual can also purchase a gift card. It's a really great way to say to someone, hey, you can say, hey, if you or someone you know is going through a tough situation and needs to document what's going on in case things get really crazy, here's a gift card. Here's a year's license to get them started. You're implying that you know it's them. You're telling them that you know what's going on without actually having to have that conversation. And they can very easily save face and say, oh, thanks, I know someone, or thanks, and put it in their pocket. And then that's the end of it.
That's really empowering. Sorry to cut you off. That's really empowering.
Yeah. So this is a way for you to extend a helping hand, which is part of our logo, that helping hand, without actually having to make them, come out about what's happening. And a lot of people aren't ready to even admit that what they're going through is not right. Yeah. So the other question was, I'm sorry, what was the other question?
The other question is do you have any advice to give to our community, the Impaction community, or just any social innovator or entrepreneur?
Network. Go to networking events, network on social. I even go as far, and like I said, I'm a little nuts, but I make it a habit that whenever I go to a social place, such as a Starbucks or a Panera or any place, and I'm working, if there's someone sitting on either side of me or both sides of me, I always introduce myself. And I just had somebody the other day say, well, I'm an introvert, I can't do that. And I say, here's how I do it. Hi, my name is Sheri. I always make it a habit to introduce myself to someone that I don't know because I meet some of the most amazing people. So tell me what you do. And it opens the floor. People love to talk about themselves. And if you start off by just introducing yourself and allowing them to tell you who they are, you never know who you're going to meet.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sheri, and thank you to everyone for asking your great questions. We have created a Google Doc with the questions and some of the answers that Sheri has provided for us. And yes, please
Yes.
follow Sheri on social
Yes.
media at Victims Voice app. She's like a great entrepreneur and leader in this space who's a clear advocate for social impact and improving the lives of others. So thank you, Sheri, for all of the work that you do. Thank you to our entrepreneurs and innovators on this call. And please do stick around for one more minute after we stop recording. But yes, thank you so much. And please do subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for our next video session in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.